2 crops, 1 plant. Potatoes swelling in the dark soil below, tomatoes ripening in the summer sun above, grown together on a single stem the old way without 1 drop of store-bought chemical. Most folks will tell you that cannot be done. But the potato and the tomato are cousins. They come from the same family, the nightshades, and where 2 plants share the same blood, a patient hand can join them into one. Today I will show you exactly how I did it, right through to the very end. And if the good Lord smiles on this little experiment, I will sit down to a plate of fries and ketchup the potatoes and the tomatoes both grown on the same plant in the same patch of earth. So let me show you how it is done. To start, we need 2 things, a tomato plant and a potato plant. Let us get those growing first. Here I have a pinch of tomato seed. I am sowing it into shallow trays in the early spring, back when the mornings still carry a frost. A few weeks on, and a whole crowd of little tomato seedlings has come up. I keep them indoors by a sunny window, warm and out of the cold, and I let them grow on. Once they start to crowd the tray and reach for the light, I move each one into its own small pot so it can put on a little size before it ever sees the open garden. Now for the potatoes. Here I have a handful of seed potatoes, 2 different kinds, and I have left them sitting in a bright spot so they can wake up and sprout. You can see those little sprouts pushing out of the eyes there. It is late spring now, and potatoes are in a hurry once they get going, so these will catch right up to the tomatoes I started months ago. I am planting them as deep as I can down in these small pots, in a mix of good compost and garden soil. And there is a reason I am using these little pots instead of putting them straight in the ground. You will see why in just a moment. All right, the plants are ready. Now comes the part that sounds like witchcraft to most folks, but is really just patience and a sharp blade. We are going to join the 2 plants into one. First, clean tools. This matters more than anything. I wipe my knife down with a little rubbing alcohol because a graft is an open wound and a dirty blade will rot it before it heals. And friend, you do not need a fancy grafting knife. Any good knife will do, so long as it is clean and truly sharp. A dull blade crushes the stem where a sharp one slices it clean, and the clean cut is the one that knits. Now, what we are looking for is a tomato cutting about the same thickness as the potato stem. The tomatoes have gone bushy and want a pruning anyway, so I go hunting for a sucker, one of those side shoots that grows out of the joint about the right size. I strip most of the leaves off that cutting, because every leaf it keeps is a mouth pulling water out of it, and a cutting with no roots yet cannot afford to lose the moisture. I leave just the growing tip at the very top. Now to the potato. I cut the potato stem clean through, at a spot where it is the same thickness as my tomato cutting. Do this in the shade. Out of the wind, a hot, dry breeze on an open cut is the enemy here. Then I slice straight down the middle of that potato stem, maybe half an inch deep, splitting it. Now I take the tomato cutting and pare both sides down into a long, thin wedge of V, about as long as the split I made in the potato. I will be honest with you. It took me more than a few tries to shave that wedge right. So do not lose heart if yours is clumsy the first time. Then I slip that wedge down into the split potato stem. When the 2 are the same thickness, they meet cleanly on both sides. But if yours do not match up perfectly, do not fret over it. Just make sure one side lines up flush, where the green skin of the one meets the green skin of the other. That is the layer that carries the water and the life, and that is the side that has to touch. Last, I bind the joint. I wrap it snug with a strip of grafting tape, round and round, firm but not choking, to hold the 2 halves pressed together and to keep that wound from drying out while it knits. Now I did not stop at one kind of graft. On a few stems I tried a second, fancier joint, what the old grafters call a whip-hand tongue. You cut a matching slant on both stems, then notch a little tongue partway down each, and slide them together so the tongues hook and lock. It holds itself before you ever reach for the tape. I wanted to see whether the fancy joint truly beats the simple one. These seed potatoes had thrown up several stems apiece, so I figured I may as well graft a tomato onto every last one and give myself the best odds. And here is a happy accident. I had lost track of which tomato variety was which along the way. So if these all take, I will end up with one plant carrying several different kinds of tomato at once. And now that reason for the little pots. Because the potatoes are potted and not planted, I can carry the whole lot indoors into the cool shade while the grafts heal. That is the trick. A fresh graft wants stillness, shade, and steady damp air for a week or so while the two halves grow into one. You cannot carry a garden bed indoors. You can carry a pot. On just one of them I tried something extra. I slipped a clear bag over the top to trap the moisture, like a little greenhouse, to test whether the graft heals any better in that close, humid air. And that is the whole of it. Now we wait and we watch. This is the part where you find out whether patience pays. A day or two on, and every one of them is drooping, sad and limp. That is the moment your heart sinks and you think you have killed the lot. But do not touch them. This morning I came out and most had stood themselves back up, straight and firm. That is the sign you are praying for. It means the water has started crossing the joint again. All I have done through this stretch is miss them twice a day, morning and evening, to keep the air around them soft. The ones under the bag are looking well too. But I see the potato is trying to fight back. It is pushing out its own little shoots from below the graft. We cannot allow that. If the potato is allowed to grow its own tops, it will pour all its strength into those and starve the tomato. So I go through and rub every one of them off, so all the plant's strength runs upward, into the tomato where we want it. Good news, the last stem, the big one that was slow, has finally stood up straight too. It just needed a little longer. Now, for the plant under the bag, it is time to wean it back to the open air. I leave the bag half off for a day to let it get used to the drier world. The next day I take the bag off altogether and set it where it catches a bit more sun. And I will tell you honestly what I found. I will not bother with the bag again. The plants that never had a bag came through looking a touch healthier than the one that did. So all that fuss with the bag gave me nothing. Sometimes the simplest way is the best way, and this was one of those times. I could not wait any longer to see how the joints had knit, so I unwrapped a couple of them to have a look. Well, would you look at that? Just 8 days and the wound has healed clean, the two grown into one. The rest I will leave bound up a while longer to give them time to grow good and strong before I ask anything of them. The grafts have taken. Now these young plants need to go out into the world and start earning their keep. I mix up a good planting soil, rich compost, garden loam, and a handful of aged manure, nothing from a bottle. The roots on this first one look strong and white and healthy, and I tease them apart gently before I set it in. Now here is the one thing you must never forget when you plant a graft like this. Keep the graft union up above the soil line. Do not bury it. If that joint goes under the dirt, the tomato will throw out its own roots above the potato, and then the whole point of the thing is lost. You will just be growing an ordinary tomato in a fancy way. So I plant it with the joint sitting proud, an inch clear of the soil, mulch it well with straw to hold the moisture, and build a little cane tower beside it to carry the plant as it climbs. Then I do the next one just the same. A while on, I go through and take off all the grafting tape now that the joints have set hard, and here is my verdict on the two grafts. Every last one of them took both the simple joint and the fancy one. But going forward, I will stick with the plain, simple graft, because it was far easier and it worked every bit as well. In fact, one of those fancy grafts I made a real mess of and nearly cut off to start over. I left it just to see, and that clumsy, ugly graft healed and grew right along with the rest. So take heart, friend. With shade and damp and patience, a tomato is a forgiving thing to graft. You do not have to be a master to make it take. To feed them along, I give them a drink of watered-down compost tea, just rainwater steeped with good finished compost, the way it was done long before anybody thought to sell you a jug of plant food. And it does my heart good to see the first yellow flowers opening on the tomatoes, and behind them, the first little green fruits already setting. Now the plant shows us what it can do, but there is still that one question hanging over the whole garden, waiting under the soil. The first tomatoes are coloring up, now lovely orange ones ripening. I will tell you, these plants have not grown wild and vigorous the way a tomato on its own roots would. They are on the lean side, not a great mass of leaves. It might be they are living on potato roots instead of their own, or that I left several stems on each root instead of choosing one, so the strength is split many ways. I cannot say for certain. But what I do not regret one bit is having all these different kinds of tomato on the one plant, the bright orange ones, the long golden ones behind, and my favorite, a dusky little purple one called the indigo pear drop. Let us try one and see. Well, that is a fine tomato. Juicy, sweet, every bit as good as any tomato growing on its own roots elsewhere in my garden. There is nothing on this earth like a tomato you grew yourself. In flavor, this experiment is already a plain success, but the real question is still buried, and I mean that literally. As the season rolled on, I kept picking tomatoes as they ripened, and it turned out there were some red kinds hidden in there too, a nice surprise. But the indigo pear drop stayed my favorite, firm, with a fine balance of sharp and sweet, and it keeps well on the shelf besides. Now here is the hard part, the patience part. I cannot dig for the potatoes yet. The tomato plant up top is still feeding those hidden potatoes with every bit of sun it catches. Only when the whole plant finishes for the season and dies back will I know whether there is anything at all down in that soil. The plants have died back. It is time. This is the moment the whole video has been waiting for. So let us tip out this first pot and see what the good earth has to say. And oh, we have got some. Would you look at that? Now I will be straight with you. These are no giants, not a heavy crop by any means, but there are real, honest potatoes here grown on nothing but the strength that tomato tops sent down through the graft. Let me dig deeper, yes, a few more down in the bottom there. A modest harvest, but it worked. It truly worked. Let us check the others. There we are, look at those, beautiful golden little potatoes. Fewer on this one, mine just a small handful. But I find it a wonder every time these grew from nothing but the energy that a tomato plant gathered up in its leaves and pushed down into the dark. And I will tell you, if you could hill these up with soil the way you would a normal potato patch, I believe you would get a good deal more. But you cannot hill them, not really. You dare not bury a tomato graft, and so the potatoes stay modest. That is the trade you make. And look here, this old graft is still holding fast. I gave it a good pull, and it did not tear at the joint at all. It broke clean above the graft instead. That joint had grown stronger than the stem around it. There is your proof it truly became one plant. Now, this being the first time in my life I have pulled both potatoes and tomatoes from the very same plant, there is only one fitting way to finish, to eat them together, the way the Lord clearly intended two nightshade cousins to be eaten. Fries and ketchup from one plant. I had frozen a batch of the tomatoes back when they ripened, since they came ready long before the potatoes were done. So now I cooked those down slow into a ketchup, and I cut the potatoes into fries, and here we are. It feels almost strange knowing every bit of this plate grew on a single plant. That is a good crunch. That is so good. And that ketchup rich and bright and fresh, nothing like the jarred kind. I do believe I will be making my own from now on. 2 crops. 1 plant, fries and ketchup, grown together in the same patch of ground, the old way, without one drop of anything from a store shelf. Sometimes the things they tell you cannot be done are just the things nobody has sat still long enough to try. If you would like to see what else these old ways can pull out of a small patch of ground, I have another one waiting for you right here. Come and let me show you. And I will see you in the garden next time. God bless.